Good evening, Greenfield. My name is Keith Barnacle, and I'm the Communications Director for the city, and I'll be moderating this virtual town hall. Thank you all so much for being here this evening and joining us. Joining me this evening, I have some great guests here in the studio. We're coming to you live from GCTV here in Greenfield. And joining me this evening, in addition to all of you viewers, is Mayor Roxanne Wiedegartner, Greenfield Police Chief Robert Haig, and Greenfield Community Resource Officer Laura Gordon. As we all know, in the era of COVID, we've kind of gone to this virtual alternative for this type of event, and we are thrilled to be able to present this type of event for the community. We want to thank everybody for taking the time to tune in. So the format of this event broadly is we'll get to know our guests a bit, and kind of have some introduction there. We'll talk a little bit about what's been happening in the city to date and in division. And then as we get about 30 minutes into this program, we will turn towards some questions that have been both solicited from the community before this event and in the weeks leading up to this event, and we'll be paying attention to the live event chat, where folks are encouraged and welcome to put questions there. I just realized I still have my mask on, so I'm taking that off right now. It's a little bit of a form of habit. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to just let you know that I've informed our guests here that we have been requesting questions from the public, and we'll be looking at questions that are coming in live over the chat, and we look forward to having a great conversation this hour. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Wiedegartner, who is going to take it from here. Thank you. Good evening, folks out there in Greenfield, and to you, Chief Haig, and to you, Officer Gordon. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening. So I'm going to get right to it. Let's start with a little history, Chief. That meaning the history of community policing efforts here in Greenfield. And what's the background there? When did it start? How did it get going? What was it like before? And what is your vision for the future of community policing in this city?
Sure. Well, where it started was a long time ago. Back in the mid-'90s, that was the push, and it was all community policing. It was community policing based. There were a lot of grants out there. The state gave you a lot of money to do these individual community-based programs. 4 hours here, 8 hours there. You get out in the community for specific events and specific shifts, and that's kind of how it started. Really, what happened was policing progressed where everything was community policing. That was just the way we needed to address most situations, most people, and the money dried up, to be quite honest, but the ideas didn't. So you had to figure out how to incorporate community policing into your everyday law enforcement. It was more about getting out and getting to know the people you're working for, because let's face it, we are working for the community. We're not just working for the department. And it was more of an evolution into how to act, present yourself, deal with the public, and it just kind of morphed from there. I mean, here in Greenfield, I'd like to think that we do that on a regular basis every day. We try to preach that we want people to be treated fairly. We want everybody to be treated as if they were family, community, again. And it seems now more than ever we need to be more transparent and focused in that manner. So with that is where we kind of sat down. We started talking about different avenues we could do, and one of the ideas that we came up with was to have a specific community resource officer who at least there's a face to the department to start. We're hoping to grow the program. It's obviously a first off. We've had some other agencies reaching out to us when they heard we were doing this as to kind of what we were doing, and the answer is not quite sure yet, but we're going to see where it goes. And the idea is that we'll have somebody to start, and Officer Laura Gordon's here today, and you'll hear from her quite a bit as we move, but she's someone whose face and position is known in the community.
Sure.
She's someone that's never shied away from the public, and a lot of the programs that she has done, whether it's been with the Comfort Dog program, whether it's been with the downtown, working with MJ Adams, working with our homeless population, or some of our other organizations giving out food, and just meeting with the homeless, especially this time of year. Officer Gordon's that person, so we thought she'd be perfect for this position to kind of start out with somebody that actually has been really hands-on with it and takes a strong passion with it as well. So that was important to us if we're going to kick this off, we want it to be somebody that we feel was going to make it successful for us right off the bat, but also somebody that's been in this community for a long time in her career and is well-known and well-respected. So it was important to us to go that direction.
Huh. Well, my next question is actually for Officer Gordon. First of all, I want to congratulate you on your new role.
Thank you, Mayor.
And thank you for your many years of service and your career in Greenfield. And then I want to know, why isn't Officer Donut here tonight?
He's already napping at home this evening.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll be happy to see him out on the streets again
Yes.
before too long. So tell us more about what you've been working on to get yourself in the mode of this job, and what you're excited about. What other innovative community policing ideas from other communities, if you know. I know this is something new for you. Just kind of give us an idea of how you've been settling in and what you'd like to make this this opportunity into.
So, thank you, Mayor. So I'm excited about the position. I've been in the position for about a week, so it's really been a week of kind of settling in. I've been in a lot of Zoom meetings. I'm learning about that. But it is a great way to stay in touch with a lot of the organizations that I've already got contacts with, and been able to discuss a lot of avenues which we hope the programs that we work together on will be able to grow. So I'm excited because this opportunity is going to allow me to continue to do a lot of what I love. I love being out of the cruiser, being downtown, walking around, or being on the bike, or being out in the apartment complexes, or wherever things are going on, and being able to actually talk to people face to face, whether it's they have an issue, they have a concern about something. I've had about 2 years ago, I had a conversation with a young woman right here on Main Street, sat down on the sidewalk with her because she needed some advice, and was able to do that. So that's the stuff I enjoy doing, and hope to carry on. So been working closely with a lot of our different agencies here in town, whether it be ServiceNet and CSO, the Salvation Army, the list goes on, and I know I'm forgetting a lot of people, and I apologize. And it just is a way to know what's going on in our community, and that's really important. And I'm excited to continue that. As far as new programs that I'm bringing in, again, I've just settled into this a week ago.
Sure.
But I have had the opportunity to reach out to a couple of different officers. Right now, I'm waiting to call back an officer at Amherst who has held a similar position, so that I can
Pick his brain.
basically, and hopefully share some
Or her brain.
ideas.
Yeah.
And then actually my first day in the position, I got to meet Trooper Brown from Northampton, who is their community resource officer. So we were able to kind of sit down and give different things that we're involved in and hope to share, and also be able to network and have other agencies either come in and work with us when we have different events here in town.
Well, hopefully, as more agencies get to know you, and I know they already do, but in this new capacity, and the more we maybe slowly ease out of COVID, you'll be able to connect and be a part of some programs that they may offer up.
Yes.
To have you be a part of. That would be a good thing. I do have, do you want another question from me, or do you have one from there? Okay. I'm full of questions tonight, but I'll let some others get their turn in a minute. So this one's actually for both of you, and it may be able to segue into some of the questions that I do know that we have received from people out in Greenfield. It's been a uniquely challenging time right now for policing in general and community policing. So I want to know what it's like for you each, and you can answer separately, of course, but it's been like for you to be a police officer in 2021, all of a sudden, and 2022, going into 22. And what is your job like on a day-to-day basis that might have been different from 2015 or 2019? Policing is policing. There are the good days and the bad days, I'm sure. And also, I think people would be interested in knowing how you keep yourselves inspired and keep wanting to inspire others in the community, both to the job, but also just to keep up your spirits.
Sure, you want me to start with this?
Sure.
Let's just say in 2020, I learned more about the medical side of things than I ever thought I would as a police officer. You know, it was always, we really like the fire department and ambulance, right? Because that's what they
their
get to
job.
do. And, but no, it was it's certainly a unique opportunity to kind of see how other departments have functioned through a pandemic on top of, obviously, we've had some interesting times in police as well. I mean, police reform has been, I think, a topic for a very long time in some form or another, always. And the topics and the reason for police reform have always kind of changed throughout time. I think it's never been like it has now, where I think that everyone recognizes, including in our profession, that reform and change is needed in some forms. I'm not saying everything needs to be thrown out and start over, but there's certainly, we have to recognize that we have to address areas of concern, and that means listening to the public and working with the public and working with agencies and really breaking down those walls that we used to have as well. So I think when you're looking at where 2020 started, was those conversations were really getting going, and then boom, we have a pandemic. And I think it gave law enforcement a real look at having to do a different job altogether. I mean, we went from being kind of, I would say, your enforcement side of things to more really a reactive and proactive at times in a health department side of things. We had to look at things differently. You needed to be more of a caring soul than just the 911 call, because let's face it, it's been stressful on everybody. Whether it's us or the folks at home or the folks that don't have homes. This pandemic has put everybody in a situation that they probably never thought they'd be in, on top of other situations that were already tough at times. So I think when you look at where we are now, and at least on my side of things, where I'm looking at being kind of the head of our department, is it's given everybody a unique perspective on why we are doing what we're doing now. It kind of brings back a little bit of why we all signed up for this job in the beginning, which was, the standard answer, right, to help people. But I do believe that's legitimately what most, if not all, get into this job for in the beginning. That's what you want to do, is help people. And I think if you look at 2020 and now into 2021, that's the priority focus of our job.
Well, a lot of people experienced something that they haven't, unless they did it by choice, haven't had to experience, certainly in recent times, and that's isolation. Yeah. All of a sudden, people were very, very isolated. Some people like that, there is a little bit of a relief for them not to have to be interacting in the community, but enough's enough, over time it gets hard. I have to believe that probably some of the way things changed and the different types of calls that you had might have had to do with that. Were you experiencing people just saying, I don't know why I did what I did, but I'm just crazy right now because I've had to be inside all day long or something?
Well, I think we became more of a conduit for people, because we were still coming to work every day. We weren't able to nor did we want to be, but we weren't one of the groups that were shut down to say, you're not going to work, you're staying home, you're not getting out there. So the people that were in isolation, they needed, I think, somebody to help them find different resources. I mean, especially in our most vulnerable population, right? That, you know, a lot of those agencies weren't as readily available during the pandemic. They were still there, you know, but it might not have been as easy to get into contact with them, and that's us.
Yeah.
Right? If you need a middle person to help you get a service or to find out where somebody is, you know, we had to work differently with different organizations that weren't in person anymore, that had really gone remotely, virtually on a lot of their jobs. And a lot of those jobs were face-to-face jobs. Like that was certainly with certain clients, certain client populations. You know, they could walk into a place when they needed help, or they knew where to go if they needed help. And when those places weren't necessarily open or readily available, we were that person. And I think that's part of what had to change too. I don't think anybody has gone crazy because of the pandemic. I think that people have been challenged to a point where they have never been challenged before. And I think that goes for our profession as well. I'm a big advocate for making sure mentally you take care of yourself, and that includes every person that comes into our building as far as officers go, because quite honestly, it's changed for officers as well. Like you don't have the resources that you thought you had before either. But it doesn't mean you get to stay home. You're coming in and you have to do it differently. And you still need to have a lot of compassion for the person that calls it. We may not even have that answer. But you have to give it your best shot to make sure they feel like you're working for them, and then you do have to follow through with it. You can't just take the phone call, pretend, and walk away. You have to follow through, and I think the follow through is some of the interesting part of what we're doing now, because I think a lot of officers didn't really think they were getting into this job for that particular reason, and that really has changed in 2020.
Officer Gordon, how have you noticed your job changing? And
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the type of officer that I enjoy having that face-to-face contact with the individuals. So when the pandemic hit, I mean, it was really hard on me, and everyone else, as the chief explained. So learning how to now navigate, well, I'm here to help people, and people are calling for help, but how do I get them that information, or how do I get what they need? That was a really big challenge in the beginning. So learning how to navigate that, like everybody else was changing as well.
Yeah.
So how do we, continue those services when people need that assistance?
Right. And it probably wasn't that easy just to be out on the street and see people that you normally see.
Correct.
To stop and chat, say, how you doing?
Right.
Especially if you know they've had a hard time in the past. But, so
Yeah, and
they
that-
weren't out there,
Yeah.
or you weren't able to connect with them easily.
Right,
Yeah.
and especially in the beginning, because I actually will go out and hike the trails in different locations where I know certain parts of our community are located, and trying to check in on them, and how do you do that, staying safe yourself and still making sure they're safe, and if they do need services, how do you navigate that?
Yeah.
So it was a challenge.
Good.
I think some of it too is we have a fantastic group of business owners, restaurant owners, folks that were coming to work every day, but it was a fraction of the business they were doing before, and that was part of what Officer Gordon was doing before as well, was letting those business owners know there's somebody there for them as well. They're coming in. It's a challenge for them as well. You want to stay open, you want to have people coming in, but some interactions were certainly charged a little bit more now because of the pandemic. You're having these conversations that you really didn't have before. Whether it's not wearing masks, or whether people are doing what they feel is the right way to do it for them.
Yeah.
And those type of conversations are certainly things that we didn't really. We don't really train for. It's part, I guess you could say, de-escalation, but it's also one of those topics that I don't think if you asked anybody before 2020, you thought we'd have everybody walking around the United States wearing masks.
Right.
And then all of a sudden that becomes that becomes the call,
Yeah.
right? That's the call that's coming in. They're not wearing their masks. And it's like, how do you deal with that to make sure you do it on an even keel, de-escalate the situation,
Right.
try to be understanding on both sides.
Right.
Restaurants where when it went to just takeout, and you have people that weren't happy about that, and then you had other people that, I don't want to go in and deal with folks that are inside because this is how I feel it should be. Well, how do you know, those are the calls that we got that we never really had before. So,
yeah.
you know, so we try to work with everybody the best we can on that.
Okay.
That was a great, thank you, and thanks, Mayor. I know you had a couple questions to get us started there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to pivot to and take a couple questions that we've had come in ahead of time, and a couple that are coming in over the chat. One that has both come in over the chat and came in ahead of time, kind of relates to, you know, where we are in the 21st century with regards to information, transparency, and data. And so this question is about, and you kind of hear this in national conversations as well, why is it so hard to get information about racial disparities in policing, stops, arrests, incarcerations in Greenfield? What can be done to make this information more readily available to the public? And so that's a great question. And you know, if you could talk about you know, what has happened, what's currently available, and if there are any changes in the pipeline, that would be good to know.
Certainly. Some folks may not know, but we have, you know, a next request system that when public records requests come in, that we have, you know, by law, we have to answer them within a certain period of time. And most of the information that comes in, as long as it's not something of an exceptionally sensitive type, we put it out for the public once the question's been answered. So we don't take the answers back down just because one person asked the question. You know, we leave them up so that way, hopefully, if someone else has the same question, they can look for them. And in that system, you could easily go to the police department, so you can see all the questions that I've asked of the police department, myself, but the department's there, so you certainly can look there.
So
also,
that's called the next request?
that's the system that we use here in the city of Greenfield, the
Okay,
next request.
but that's not necessarily, is that accessible from your Facebook page or your website, or they have to know to go to next request?
You would have to know to go to next request, but it is on,
okay.
you know, open government. We have.
Okay, right.
You know, we have the ability to look at anything. Anything that comes into the city has to be entered into there, whether it's direct to us. So we have somebody that handles our records full-time. It's a full-time job, along with a few other things that she does for us. So even if it comes in not under that system, we have to enter it into there. So if the question, you know, a question comes by email to me for certain information, that information is put into that system as well. So any question that comes in ultimately makes it into that system and gets disseminated properly. So I would urge anybody that's looking for specific type of information, whether it's stops, whether it's number of arrests, types of arrests, we can break down our system like that. It's not the easiest system in the world to work with. I've got to be honest with you. It's not something you can manipulate very easy, but we can find that information, and we will if we get those requests. And we've had requests of certain nature, and they are on that site.
I think the emphasis behind their question was, do you do it by race and by, I don't know what you would call it, by race and by event? So
We can break it down any way.
I see. But it isn't necessarily readily available in next request like that. You have to ask for it.
That's correct, because a
Yeah,
lot of the
okay.
information that we have has to be sanitized. There's
Sure.
personal information, you know, there's
Yeah.
social security addresses, things like that. So we
Yeah.
can't just open up our system for anybody to go in and thumb through. But certainly, if you're looking for demographic type of information, types of arrest calls, the folks, the ethnic background of the folks that are in the system for particular things, we can break that all down. It's difficult to
Takes
tell
a
you
little
that I can just
time.
open it up. Yes, but we will put that out. We don't hide any of that information. We've been asked for it before. There's quite a few of those on that site, on that webpage, for questions that have been asked in the past, and we certainly will answer any question that comes to us.
So it's hard by design in the sense that you do have to go through this one system.
It's a 25-year-old system, and that has all the information in it, and to manipulate that system,
Yeah.
they've kind of got us. We've looked at different systems over the years. They're very
Yeah.
expensive. Most of the state of Massachusetts uses the same one as us, and you
Yeah.
probably get the same answer at any place you go. It's not that easy to navigate, but you can get that information.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
it takes some time.
Okay.
In your circles around the Commonwealth or the region, have you seen any police departments do this really well, or seen programs that you know can kind of handle the public aspect of this really well?
So at the end of the year, we have to compile and by accreditation, we have certain forms and things that we have to file at the end of the year. Our use of force has to be filed at the end of the year. Not a problem. We can post that out easily. We can easily tell types of motor vehicle stops. We can easily break down how many arrests we had and whether, it's male, female, ethnic background. Very easily at the end of the year, we can break that down. We can break it down by month as well. I mean, it's not something you can't do. It's just something that isn't as easy as just hitting one button and doing it. However, if somebody wants it, absolutely, we'll break it down. We've started talking about providing public safety each month with a breakdown of what we had the month before. So that's something that will be a change. We're working on that right now. We have a new deputy chief. We also have multiple new supervisors that we're tasking with multiple different things now. So we've talked about doing that each month for public safety, so we can make that type of information more readily available. It's really hard to go back and give you 25 years of data just at the touch. We can do it. It's going to take some time. But now if we can start doing it monthly, provide, those types of things that the community wants, and please email the deputy chief if there's particular things you're looking for.
I was just going to say, if there's a resident in Greenfield or a citizen in Greenfield who wants to make some type of request, what should they do?
So we have a records email that's attached to our site.
Yep.
And forgive me, our site crashes a little bit. We're working on it.
So this
You
is a
and-
But it can
dedicated.
go
You and the
through.
state.
It can go through the city hall as well. It can go through the clerk's office, and she's great about getting us that information right away. It goes into the same system. It emails out to everybody in the department that has access to it. So myself, the records clerk, the deputy chief, we all get it. My court officer, who does a lot of our stats for us, all of us get that email notification when it comes in. So there's a whole bunch of eyes on it to make sure it gets done in an orderly fashion. But so I certainly urge anybody that has a specific request, great, but we are going to also try to have kind of a standardized monthly tally for the Public Safety Commission, because that's really what they do, right? And they should be keeping eyes on us, making sure we're doing what we're doing. So we're going to try to provide a little bit more information, right up front. So there isn't so many questions about are we doing this, are we not doing that? Let's put some of it out there, and if there's additional that somebody wants, we'll try to make sure, well, one, we'll get it done, but also maybe we can accommodate that in our monthly update to the Public Safety Commission.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I'm going to take another question here from the public. And this is a question that came in from a constituent, and it kind of relates to the unsheltered population in Greenfield and downtown. And I know this is one thing, Chief, you mentioned a few moments ago, all the different elements that went into life during a pandemic and enforcement of wearing masks. And I know as a city, getting that messaging out was challenging at times, and a lot of to some people, it could come down to an affordability issue, an accessibility issue, or a physical or mental health issue. So, that's something that kind of, played out over the past year. This question from a constituent is about our unhoused population in downtown, specifically at the Energy Park. So I'm just going to read the question. I have seen the unhoused people in downtown in the Energy Park kicked out of the spots they'd chosen to rest in and told to move along. Why does this happen when they're not posing a safety risk to themselves or others? What is the Greenfield Police Department's current approach to engaging with the unhoused or unsheltered population in Greenfield and ensuring that their safety and dignity are prioritized?
Sure. Laura, do you want to?
Sure. So,
Great question.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of times, pretty much every day that I work, I can say that I go down to the Energy Park, and there's many reasons that I go through there. One is to check on a lot of the unhoused personnel that are down there. It's a great way to get a dialogue going. Sometimes it's a dialogue, especially back in September. Okay, cold weather is coming. Are you working on getting shelter? Is there some way that we can assist in that? So there's a lot of great dialogue that happens. But then there are times also that I get called down there because we get calls at the station for different types of activity that is going on. And we do have to respond to that, whether it be complaints about drinking or littering or different types of activity. I know one of the issues, and I believe MJ Adams assisted in this, was bathrooms down there for the unsheltered individuals, having access to that, especially in the middle of the night when there's nothing open, because we were running into issues and getting calls of, people urinating and defecating in the park. So that was an issue. So I know that there was the work done by MJ.
Well, and there's, even because of the pandemic during the day,
Correct.
there weren't that many places open.
Correct.
That would allow you to go in easily.
So, so a lot of it is that I go down and try to have contact with the individuals down there. And if I'm down there and some people pick up and leave because I'm down there, that does happen. There are times that I am called down there, and because of certain activities that are going on, the individuals may be asked to leave. The town parks do have postings on them of the city ordinances. For example, the one is that there's no trespassing between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And that is something that we've kind of stepped back from because of the pandemic, and people, where do they go if they don't have affordable housing or whatever their situation is, because they all have different stories, different life skills. So, yeah, it's we're down there for different reasons. And sometimes, like I mentioned on that sign, there's also, the penalty for littering or the penalty for being down there with alcohol, or there's a few others on there as well. And I guess when we do get the calls from other community members who are down there and trying to enjoy the park, that they have concerns, we have to find a way of balancing what the other community members are asking of us, as well as the activity going on in the park, and how do we go down there and kind of mediate the situation. We're not trying to go down there and arrest people if we don't have to. If it's a situation where they need a ride to a location where they can get shelter, I know myself and I know other officers that will go down there and do that. We've brought them trash bags and multiple different things they need, food. And a lot of it is also just talking to them and seeing if they have those connections. Do they have the information on how to get into the shelter? Do they know where there are food services? Do they know where there are showers and other things that they need? So there are times that we do need to ask people to move along, but most of the time when we're down there, we're actually dealing with talking to who's down there, learning about them, and what services are we able to assist with if we are.
Sticking with that for a minute, have you noticed a change this winter over last winter? We did have some increase in shelter space at the Service Net organization on Wells Street, and more vouchers for hotels, and the Salvation Army was doing what they could, plus we had the warming center. So I'd be interested in knowing. It doesn't get to everyone. The
Right.
shelters fill up too fast. We clearly need more
Correct.
space, but we at least kind of took our time over the last year and this year to really focus on that as something we wanted to fix for the winter, to the extent that we could both afford it and actually get it done. We had the actual space, so.
I've personally seen an improvement, or I don't know if that's the right word I want to use, but yes, it's very different. Like I mentioned earlier, there are several locations in town that I will at least try to check once a week, because I know that there's unsheltered people at those locations, or have been, and a lot of them have shelter. A lot of them have gone on to the homeless shelter. They know about our warming center, which they can go to during the daytime. They know that they can go through the process of the shelter, and if they don't have room right now because they're full, then they do have the voucher system, like you mentioned. And a lot of people didn't know about that originally.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an improvement. We still go out and check some of those sites just to make sure, because people move around, new people come into town, and it's important that they know where those services are. And if nothing else, they can contact us if they don't want it right now, because sometimes they choose, no.
Yeah, that does happen too.
Yeah. You know, if you change your mind and you want the information, you can call, we'll get it to you.
And we have to remember, there's some folks that legitimately don't want our help.
Yep.
Just don't. You know, we offer it, but some don't. And I think that's a misconception too, is we'll get particular folks talking about individuals that we know pretty well, and they almost want to force help. And they don't want help. They might not even need help. Some people do go there just to socialize. It's where they go during the day. It's to see people. It's to get out and have that little bit of contact and normalcy. And a lot of these folks actually have housing. So it's not. We have to remember that people have free will, and you can offer it, but there's no forcing it, and that's not wrong either.
Yeah, good.
I was curious, as you were talking, Officer Gordon, about how do the relationships work between the service agencies and the police with those types of referrals? You know, I understand sometimes there are crimes. I understand sometimes people may not want help. But for folks who may want help, and it might be this right time for an intervention and getting them connected to the right services, how does the Greenfield Police Department work to maintain those relationships with those agencies and with those services in the community to make sure that happens?
Right now, a lot of Zoom meetings.
A lot of Zoom meetings.
But yeah, I mean, we meet on a regular basis with like our director of the shelter, so that we have the most up-to-date information on how that process is working, especially after they added on to the second floor, which has been wonderful. So we have that connection where if that information changes, we either get emails right away, or we regularly, like I said, have meetings so that we can pass that out on to our patrol officers and everybody on the force, and it goes out to individuals when we have contact with them, as well as, you know, we work very closely with CSO. Actually, just had a great meeting with them yesterday, because I know that there's a lot of conversation around in calls that deal with mental health. You know, is it really the police that should be responding versus social workers? So there is a conversation around that, and that it needs to be a joint adventure with the two of us. One, so that they are safe. They are concerned about their safety at times on these calls. And how do we start making that collaboration work better? Talking about they have mobile units that are able to come out and assist us. And we talked about them actually coming in, if they know that there's a concern, coming in, talking to us. We might go out as a co-response with them, and then once we get there, if the scene is safe, we step out and we let the workers do their job. So that's all in the works right now, and we also have great relations with ServiceNet and DMH, and I know we meet with the Mental Health and Law Enforcement Collaborative, and I can't even name all the agencies that are part of that. I know the jail diversion is part of that. I know that I have also had the opportunity of working with the family drug court, so that we are assisting the individuals in meeting their goals and graduating that program as well. So there's a lot of different agencies that we're trying to collaborate with and look at how we can work together and assist the people in the community. It's not about us always going out and making an arrest. It's, okay, this person has whatever going on in their life, and how can we assist, whether it's another agency, a joint thing that we can work together. So that's an ongoing conversation.
When you're looking at mental health, I mean, really the last, and I think Officer Gordon will agree with me on this, the last thing you want to do is arrest somebody that's in a crisis.
Right.
Like that's actually that's not gonna help anybody
help,
out
no.
at the end of the day. Now, sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes that's what has to happen in order to kickstart something, but that's not the goal.
Yeah.
That's really a last option, and I think we do a pretty good job of that.
How do you make that decision?
Well, when you go to the scene and you're assessing the scene, and again, it might be somebody we've dealt with a number of times.
A known person.
Yeah,
that-
it might be. But you go and you assess what's going on at that moment. And, we might have to make the decision that, no, this is somebody that we can bring another service in and it's okay. But if they're at a point where that's not safe for them or the other agency or even the surrounding neighbors, then we might have to take other steps, because the ultimate goal is that they're safe and others are safe as well.
Okay.
And a lot of it is, once we get there too, sometimes it's just de-escalation, talking to the person and okay, what's going on today, if you can.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Are all of your officers trained in de-escalation? I think you and I have talked about this.
So we have
before.
de-escalation as our mandatory in-service on multiple levels. It's not just one class. A lot of classes, they kind of meld together now as well. Mental health has been on a mandatory part of our in-service training for years now.
at least 5.
We also continue with the CIT, the critical incident training, crisis. It's basically crisis and people in crisis, and how to deal with someone when you get there and recognize that it's not cut and dry. It's like you have to be patient, you have to use some compassion. You obviously have to be safe, but at the end of the day, anybody that's calling us, for the most part, is in some form of crisis. Might be very little or it might be very big. So, and for that person, it's important. So you need to go and you need to listen and you have to be patient with it. But part of the CIT training, we've been doing this now for a number of years, and we're continuing to get the grant, and we're continuing to train officers that come on, new officers, because some officers come from departments now that we're outside of civil service and we're hiring people on a regular basis now. They don't necessarily have the same training, so we want to get everybody trained to the best we can. But it's evaluation of everything, and it's what's the best outcome for that situation that doesn't necessarily fit what was policing 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That's part of change, and I think we do a good job with that. But certainly when it comes to the mandatory training part of things right now, a lot of it, and I would say a majority of it outside of our basic 24 hours that you do every year, firearms, CPR, legal updates, the majority of that extra training is all based around mental health, bias-based policing, implicit bias policing, a lot of additional mental health and de-escalation is part of all of those. So.
And I was curious too, just from a department perspective, that type of training is happening all the time, all year round for all officers in the department?
We have annual mandates every year.
it's
And on
mandated.
top of those annual mandates, we have
Through
to go
accreditation.
on and above. So we have a deputy chief that when he was a lieutenant, put a program in place that we can constantly put out information as it's coming in, and we can verify that our officers are doing it. That's important because when things happen and people want to know information, we have a very easy system right now to go in and say the training was done now. This is the type of training we had. These are the extra trainings we had. These are just tidbits that we'll pull off of other places, whether it's news reports or even little snippets of random incidents that happen in other places that catch a lot of notoriety, so that people know, that people are paying attention. Maybe there's a different way of handling something, and we put those kind of things out all the time.
Great. I'm going to take a question that has come over the chat that I think is a good one too. This is from a constituent who's wondering why, and this kind of talks about the municipal budget as a whole, but is wondering why there's seems to be hiring and promotions in the police department when certain areas of the city, to quote this question, when we can't afford to fund our kids being in school in person and getting transported to school. I'm assuming that's what the remainder of that question is about. So I was curious if you could talk about that a little bit, and I know, I think the mayor, that was something that had been discussed before. So any comments on that?
I'm not sure as far as how we can talk about a budget and where money should be, shouldn't be. I mean, that really is up to the mayor. But I can tell you that we're not overstaffed.
Yeah.
If you want to look at our overtime budget compared to some neighboring communities, even smaller than us, we certainly don't have a monster overtime budget.
Yeah.
The reason for promotions is, quite honestly, people leave, and you need to continue with your command staff, because if you don't have a strong command staff all the way down and people are in limbo, then that actually will cause your police department to get out of sync, and that's not what we want to do. Being in limbo is not good in the police world. People, we run a fairly structured department, and when those structures break down, that's when issues happen. So promotions are made based on, these aren't new positions. They're replacements for people that have retired or people that have gone on to other jobs. And I would say that if you look at our budget coming into this year, based off of last year, the number's not any different.
Yep.
Yeah, well, for information purposes, there is a graph, and I think the folks at the command center over there can put it up on the screen. But it does give you a picture of certainly the FY21 budget, which is sort of stark when you look at it, because we can always want to have more money for everything, any department, and certainly for our schools. But our schools consume a significant piece of the budget. It's about 37.9% of our overall budget. And a big chunk of that is salaries. People who work in any of our departments must be paid, and their insurance must be paid for, their health care, their retirement, all of those things. And I feel like we say this all the time, but it is true, and there isn't always a lot left over after that. Educating kids is an expensive process, as it should be. So it's how we use that money that matters. As far as the police budget is concerned, that's a small fraction, and when you see that on the graph, and I don't know if they have been able to put it up on the screen yet. Okay, well, it is on the website. Yep. Under the budget, and it does show you that compared, it's a $19 million school budget this year for just the Greenfield schools. The overall budget is significant because we also pay for the technical school, and we pay for a Smith Vocational School placements. And then the entire public safety budget, which is about $7 million. And that's police and fire and dispatch and animal control and a bunch of other things. The chiefs, your budgets usually hovers in the $3 million to $4 million. I don't know that I've seen a budget of $4 million. No.
I'll take it.
Yeah, okay, see what we can do. Fiscal year 22, because we're coming out of a pandemic, is probably not going to look much different than that from fiscal 21. We've level funded most of the departments, not leaving us a lot. We do, in many departments, have to have staff, and we have to hire new staff. So in some places, there will be some hiring going on. And as you say, police officers retire. As in our former deputy chief, they move on to other places. Fortunately, we were certainly able to get a good deputy chief in there right behind him. But this is what keeps me awake at night, among other things.
One of the things I did 8 years ago when I came here was I came after the budget already started, right? I came in October, so there was already a budget in place. And what I did is I spent that year trying to figure out what money was actually not being utilized well. Mm-hmm. And I reconstructed that budget, and there were a lot of reductions that came out of that budget for the following year, which included overtime costs that were sky high. I had a lot of overtime when I first got here. That number has been reduced drastically. And it's been reallocated for, I think, a more well-run police department. It's allowed us to get accredited. It's allowed us to be more accountable. It's allowed us for the best practices and to prove that we're doing the best practices while still being fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that was very important when I first took over, was let's look at how we can revamp the police department to make sure that we're here and we're functional. We didn't have a good staffing level. We had a lot of temporary positions, and like I said, when things are temporary, that's not good in the police world. We need permanency, and we have reallocated those funds. And I think, it's hard for me to look at it, but I do a kind of a historic book. I still write it in pen, on paper, and I've kept track of where those changes have been from the first time I got here in each account, in each line, and where that money's now allocated now. So.
Yeah, I think it's important for the community to understand that whether it's schools and specific to the police department, I'll say it again, a lot of it is staffing. And the majority of it is. We don't spend a lot of money on if any, tactical gear, big vehicles, tanks, that sort of thing. That's not what the Greenfield Police Department spends its money on.
And I have to say, when folks reach their retirement, you're bringing in a new group who has a new perspective and new training, and it's not something you're
Right.
doing for retraining, right? They're coming in trained
Training's
currently.
a pretty good-sized part of your budget,
So
too.
It is,
Yeah.
and that's an important part of the budget.
In the city of Greenfield, we have two fantastic commissions and committees that kind of provide an oversight role to departments in the city, including the police and fire department, emergency command, the Public Safety Commission, and the Human Rights Commission, kind of have these unique roles there. Could you talk a little bit about how the police department, the Greenfield Police Department, is working with those city bodies?
Sure. So the Public Safety Commission is obviously by charter. It's specific to what they do for the department. They have the ability to, be part of interview processes, review policy and procedure. Monthly, myself and the fire chief report to them about what's been going on over the previous month, as well as any needs coming up, including budgets, including capital. Including issues. Again, if you have issues, that you want to bring to the police department, whether it's complaints, whether it's positive, which we like those once in a while, you can come direct to the PD, but you also have an avenue through the Public Safety Commission. They're challenged with making sure that reports are followed up on, or complaints are followed up on, or issues are followed up on. So there's an avenue there. The Human Rights Commission, that will be one of Officer Gordon's new assignments. She will be the new liaison currently. That's me. But when they have certain things that come up, they'll have a person they can go to directly to bring issues, concerns, questions back to the police department. Now, I'm not throwing everything on Laura to say that she's going to be doing all this. She's our liaison. She's going to bring things back, and we're going to decide how to best deal with them within our department. Some might be just informational. Some might be legitimate concerns. Some might be concerns that may not even be us. We have other police agencies that come into Greenfield quite often. We get confused once in a while with other places, So, and that's happened in the past. So, she'll be that liaison. Hopefully, we can have a good working relationship. I know that they're trying to structure themselves a little bit more as well to be able to bring us concerns on a more formal level,
Right.
as well as to the mayor's office, because obviously the mayor is who their direct report is as well. So. I see that being a little bit more back and forth than it had been in the past.
Interestingly enough, I sat in on the Charter Commission review last night, and a significant amount of time, more towards the beginning of the meeting, was devoted to the Public Safety Commission and how and if it needed to be changed in any way. And then the subject of a civilian review board also came up as a separate board. And I don't recall exactly how, Forgy, former Mayor Forgy. Now, Councilor Forgy was responsible for discussing the Public Safety Commission with the Public Safety Commissioners to get some ideas about what they wanted. And I know they presented her with quite a few, and she presented that last night. So there will be some changes recommended, I feel certain, by the council. It was a great discussion, and they may well put forward at least the idea and the recommendation that we should begin to study how we would structure a civilian review board alongside it. I don't know if you've had any experience with that before, or if you have thoughts on that.
We're about to have a lot of experience
Well-
with it under the state's police reform.
Well, I thought that the new police reform, I don't know if Bill mandated it, but heavily recommended.
Yeah, so there's going to be commissions that will be
Probably
set
didn't
up.
fund it, but,
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Because as of July 1, these things are supposed to be in place at the state level. These review boards that they're setting up through the reform bill, which I have a Zoom, of course, on Friday about the reform bill, in which we have to figure out what we need to do as a city, because there's going to be information that's going to be submitted to the state on a regular basis, and this is in regards to complaints, this is in regards to training. The state is going to have a review board as far as hires and decertification and certification of police officers. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out, but that's all in that reform. And a lot of that reform revolves around civilian oversight, civilians being part of training. Now, I believe that we have to have some civilian oversight, and I'm okay with that. I think the training side of things, we have to be careful, because we need to make sure that we're actually being trained in proper process, best practices, and that can come from civilian participation, of course, but we still are police officers, and I think we still need to keep in mind that police officers need to train police officers,
Right.
along with civilians. Okay, we can't just wipe us out completely. But I think if folks go into that review and the police reform, it's quite intensive, and there are a lot of committees and commissions that are going to need to be formed, which haven't yet, but they're coming.
Thank you, Chief.
interesting. Well, I know that part of the idea of the Civilian Review Board was maybe too narrowly focused based on what you just said, but not a wrong thing. It was about complaints being brought forward and who actually processes the complaint, and how do we know that it's being investigated properly. And I think it was raised by more than one counselor that the investigation process is a skill, and it's something that you learn how to do, and you train for. So it's something that anyone who might be thinking about being on a civilian review board has to understand, that it isn't just a question of finding people and asking them questions about what they did and what happened and what is their view, but there are ways to get to it so that the officer or officers, even if that's necessary, involved, and the civilian, the person bringing the complaint, get their proper due diligence, because at the end of the day, that is the basis of the law. So.
I mean, it goes in hand with a lot of what we have to publish at the end of the year, with our use of force, our bias-based police reporting. All of those need to be filed at the end of the year, and
Yep.
now those will be those are filed with the state. So
Really quick last question,
Sure.
follow-up question from someone online. Does the Public Safety Commission actually have, do they issue any disciplinary action, or do they just provide recommendations? How does that work? Really, really quick, 30 seconds or less.
Sure. If it's an investigation that needs to go on within the department, it's assigned within the department. They bring the complaint to us. We investigate it if it's appropriate by us. There's times that we've hired outside agencies to investigate for us when it's appropriate. We've also asked for outside agencies, state police and whatnot, to do the investigation for us as well when it's something that conflicts. If there were a complaint about myself, realistically, that's where the Public Safety Commission would come in. So,
Okay,
And I suspect me too, eventually.
you are the end.
fantastic.
So behave.
Well, I'm getting the signal that we are just about out of time.
Wow.
And so I wanted to just take a quick moment here to thank everyone for tuning in and to thank everybody here
Yeah.
for participating tonight in this opportunity. Mayor Wiedegartner and her office can be contacted anytime at City Hall, mayor@greenfield-ma.gov. As we make our way through the COVID-19 pandemic as a city, just a friendly reminder to do everything we can to help stop the spread, wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. So on that note, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and good night, Greenfield.